We're going to have FMLA training today, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to our instructor for this hour or so, Mike Augustine. Mike is the HR labor relations person here in the county, and he does a wonderful job every day. He runs our FMLA program. He told me to say, he wrote this down, that he's a K-State graduate, and he wanted me to say, go Wildcats. I only said it because he wrote it down. He spent 19 years in retail management prior to Shawnee County with Walmart and some other stores. He and his wife Jennifer have made Topeka their home since 2016, and they have 3 children. So welcome, Mike, and thank you for his presentation.
Thank you. So good afternoon. Hopefully nobody ate the big buffet lunch coming and then sitting in a somewhat temperate room with dark lights and an FMLA presentation. So just a few housekeeping things. For those that don't know already, the restrooms are straight through the back door and off to the left, men's and ladies. And it's not like kindergarten where you have to raise your hand or anything like that. No expectations to go use the restroom or exit the facility. So we do have about an hour long presentation and then a group activity. So I throw that out at the beginning just to get everybody pumped about it. So without further ado, we'll be talking about FMLA basics. And so I kind of struggled at first. FMLA, or the Family Medical Leave Act, is so broad. What do I talk about? So I thought, well, I'll tell everybody what happened to me exactly 15 years ago to the month. So I was living in Iowa, and I was a co-manager of a store, and we were expecting our very first kid. So all new to me. Here I am going to be a new dad, and baby's supposed to be born sometime in March, and so, man, I got to get this leave all situated. So I talked to my manager, and he said, how much leave do you need? And I said, oh, just a couple of weeks. You know, we don't have family around. I just want to be there for my wife and, get adjusted. He said, oh, yeah, fine, no problem. He sends in the leave request. About 3 days later, I get a call from his boss, my district manager, saying something to the extent of, where on earth did you ever get the idea that I'm going to pay you for 2 weeks to be gone? I said, excuse me? I'm sorry. And he said, you're not pregnant. What entitles you to take 2 weeks off? I don't need to pay you for that. If you want to be off, you can get approved vacation, but there is no way I'm going to allow you to be gone from the stores for 2 weeks, period. I said, okay, and you're my boss's boss, so I will do what I'm told, and I took my week of vacation, and I returned 7 days after my daughter was born in the story. So, little did I know, 15 years ago, there was this thing called Family Medical Leave Act, and that I would have qualified as a new father under the Family Medical Leave Act. So, my experience, I relate to you only in the fact that, did it ruin the rest of my career? No. Did it leave a bad taste in my mouth? No, not really, because I didn't know any better. But how many times does it happen over and over and over and over again in the workplace? Not just in Shawnee County, but all over, where because maybe one supervisor wasn't informed that they made a decision that affected the life of not only one employee, but that family and family and family. So, and that's why we're here today. So we can provide you the nuts and bolts basics of the Family Medical Leave Act. So you go back and you can better prepare everybody that works in your departments how to properly administer the Family Medical Leave. Okay. So, a couple of things to throw out. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be. Don't look like one. Nothing as that. The presentation is gleaned from the overall presentation from the Department of Labor, but again, it doesn't carry the force of legal opinion. So, FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act of 1993, President Clinton signed it into law. Okay? At the time, there was no federal protection, there was no legal protection for somebody needing to take time off, either for themselves to deal with a serious medical condition or for their families to deal with a serious medical condition. It was independent to each employer whether or not time was granted. Now imagine all the problems that could solve. Everything that could come up from that. Okay? Basically, it promoted a work-life balance. Okay? By allowing people to have time off to deal with medical issues, true serious conditions, or to help their family deal with the conditions that they may have without having to sacrifice their job on the other side. So what are we going to talk about today? Basically 5 things. We're going to talk about which employers are covered and which employees are covered. Why we take family medical leave. How much leave do we get? What does the employer have to do? And what does the employee have to do? So, employers that are covered. The law says that private sector employers with 50 or more employees, public agencies, and schools. So which one does Shawnee County fall into, obviously? We're the middle one, the public agency. So automatically, we are a FMLA provider, right? So on the flip side, an employee, in order for an employee to be eligible for FMLA, here's the conditions. They have to work for a covered employer. My wife works for a very small bank, and they have less than 50 employees, and it's a private employer. They don't have FMLA leave. The employee has to work at least 12 months with Shawnee County. They have to have at least 1,250 hours on the books. So if you have a full-time employee, how many hours, not working overtime, does a full-time employee work in a given year? 28, typically. So, and that 1,250 hours has to be before the leave begins, 12 months before, during that time. And then the last condition being employed at a work site within 75 miles. That last condition is in place for employees that might be out and about all across the country, spread out and not centered to a workplace. So, why do I get to take FMLA if I'm wanting to take FMLA? So there's 3 reasons. Pregnancy, for the birth or placement of a child, to care for a spouse, son, daughter, parent, we'll get into the definitions of those, with a serious health condition, or for the employee's own serious health condition. At the bottom I also put, there is a military family leave. We're not going to discuss that today. It very rarely comes up, but it is an option under Family Medical Leave Act. The conditions of a military family leave are a little bit different. If you do have an employee that's encountering that, please contact HR and we'll work through that. So, the first reason we'll talk about a little bit more in depth for the birth or placement of a child. So, both the mother and the father are entitled for FMLA. Okay? Just because the guy isn't pregnant doesn't mean that he doesn't get to qualify for FMLA. It can be divided up. It doesn't have to start exactly on the birth date or the actual birth, and it can be for the care and bonding with the infant or the child. Also, it can be for adoption or foster placement. Okay? And then lastly, in most cases, you have to take the leave within the 12 months of the placement or the birth of the child. Okay? You can't make it go on for 3 years down the road. Questions on that? Okay. All right, so I said that we talk about actual definitions of family members. So, pretty much lots of words up there, but I want to point out in loco parentis, A parent can be your biological parent, it can be a step parent, a foster parent, or in loco parentis, somebody that filled in growing up for you as a parent. They took care of you, they provided financial support, maybe you lived with them. So when somebody says, I need to care for Auntie Sue, she was like a mom to me, little bells should go off in your head thinking, well, you know, aunts aren't covered, but then you need to ask a couple more probing questions like, who is Auntie Sue? What did she do for you? Okay? And when if the employee says, well, I lived with Auntie Sue for 17 years, my mom passed away and she was like my mom. Maybe that would be a relationship like in local parentis. Okay? Spouse, husband, wife, defined or recognized in the state where the employee is married. It does include same-sex marriage, and it does include common law marriage. Okay? HR has a form when you have a situation of common law marriage, same-sex marriage. We have that form if certification needs to be obtained. Comes to HR, you put the form out to the employee. And then lastly, son or daughter. And this is, again, for everything other than military leave. Son or daughter is, as you believe, you know, your biological son or daughter. Could be your adopted son or daughter, foster child, stepchild, a legal ward, or, as we talked about, somebody that you're taking care of financially, supporting the child, they're living with you, you're caring for them, you are as if you are a stand-in parent. Okay? It only goes up to 18 years of age or older. However, adult children that have a physical or mental disability that can't self-care, then those children can be also included under FMLA. You as an employee can take FMLA to care for your adult children under those circumstances. They also have to have a serious medical condition that would go with the physical or mental disability. So, talking about serious health condition. It's an injury, illness, or impairment, physical, mental condition involving either inpatient care or continuing care by a healthcare provider. So, if an employee comes up to you, Pat, and says, hey, man, I'm going to be in the hospital this week and I'm having a little bit of surgery and I might need some time. What's your first reaction?
Get your FMLA forms filled out.
You get a gold star, man.
Well, I was having an employee that's just recovering from open arm surgery this week. So,
Yes.
been there, done that.
You know, when an employee says, hey, I'm going to stay in the hospital, I was in the hospital, I will be going to the hospital, that's a red flag saying, hey, this is probably a condition where I need to get them some FMLA papers. An employee doesn't have to come out and say, I need FMLA. They can say, hey, I'm going to the hospital. And that is their FMLA request. They can say, hey, man, my high blood pressure is really acting up, and I'm just feeling awful. That would be an FMLA request. So we have to be attentive as an employer to recognize those.
What if they want a week of vacation and then come back later and say, oh, I had surgery a couple weeks ago?
That might be a separate condition. FMLA can be applied in retroactive, but if they didn't ask for it on the front side and then they're coming back and saying, then that's a whole different situation.
So we don't force them to take FMLA or fill out FMLA paperwork if we do find out that they're having surgery?
It would be a covered condition, but they shouldn't be applying it retroactively like that unless they're coming back to you and saying, hey, I just didn't get my paperwork filled out.
Well, you're not suggesting we force them to fill out the paperwork anyway. We just have to give it to them, whether they choose to do it.
Absolutely.
Us as a
Yep.
employee.
Yep. So, going through continuing treatment by a healthcare provider, this is what it means. So those conditions right there, incapacity plus treatment that we talked of, pregnancy, chronic conditions. Chronic conditions meaning to the fact that I have chronic high blood pressure. I have diabetes, like a chronic condition that is treatable, and it might be a long-term condition. Tying right into the next point, you have a permanent long-term condition. This could also mean that a whole number of things. I was hurt in an accident, and I have to have regular checkups at least 2 or 3 times a year. That's a long-term condition, it's not going away. Absence to receive multiple treatments. Think of somebody that is battling cancer. Okay. They're going to have periodic treatments time to time. Or somebody that is battling kidney disease and they're on dialysis, and they have to have regular treatments. That goes right into point 5. So, a little bit more about incapacity plus treatment. It can be a combination of both being in a medical facility and afterward treatment, but 3 consecutive calendar days is the key point to that. They've had treatment for 3 consecutive days. Pregnancy, basically with pregnancy, any incapacity, due to pregnancy or prenatal care. So somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm on bed rest. Due date's in a month and a half. So does their FMLA time actually start at the due date, or when the doctor places them on bed rest? Bed rest. Chronic conditions, key here, requires periodic visits twice a year. Okay, once a year for your yearly checkup, not so much. If you have a condition where it requires 2 visits or more, then it could be an FMLA serious health condition. And then long-term conditions, as we talked about, it's permanent, long-term. Treatment may or may not be effective. And then an absence to receive multiple treatments. So. The question comes up always, how much leave is granted? Okay. Well, that actually depends on what the medical provider says. When we ask for medical certification, we go with what the medical provider says. If the employee asks for a full 12 weeks, but the doctor says, no, you don't need a full 12 weeks, you're only going to be out for 8, then we take what the medical provider says. The employee is able to get an extension if need be. However, they can't extend it more than 12 work weeks. Shawnee County's measured work week is 40 hours. Okay? FMLA allows us 480 hours of time. Our time tracking unit is an hour and fractions of an hour. And we track FMLA time through, what program do we track FMLA time through? Executive time. Thank you. So, an employee is allowed also to take intermittently. And this is, in my opinion, this is where FMLA gets murky. Yes, sir.
Is that 480 lifetime for that illness, or is it per year?
Great question, and it's only per plan year. Okay, and I've got a slide that shows what our plan years are, but it's only for 12 months set period. So, but it is, and I got to go back to that. It is for all FMLA conditions. Somebody can have more than one FMLA condition. Okay? I can have an FMLA because maybe I have high blood pressure. I can have an FMLA because I had a stroke and I need to see my doctor 4 times a year. I can have an FMLA because I have a heart condition. But all of that time that I take can only add up to 480 hours in any given plan. So, great question. So, intermittent time, this is where it's critical on the forms that the employee brings back from their medical provider, question 6 and question 7. And it speaks to the fact of, will the employee need any reduced schedule or reduced hours, because reduced schedules are covered under FMLA, or will the employee and/or will the employee have any need for intermittent usage based on flare-ups or appointments? And that's what determines how we distribute the intermittent leave. It is not a blanket statement of, oh, I just use it whenever. Okay. Sometimes it is tough to tell. If somebody has a condition that flares up unexpectedly, and their doctor knows that it flares up unexpectedly, the doctor will usually put 3 times per month or however many times that they think, but that is their best educated guess, and that's what the law says, is the doctor's best educated guess. Okay. But again, it's not carte blanche, okay, you call in sick whenever you want because of this. And that's where we get problems. The leave to bond with a child, we talked about this a little bit earlier. In Shawnee County, we do encourage the block of leave, to get to know the infant. And also we do allow intermittent or reduced schedule leave. One example, we had a deputy last fall, and he had a newborn, and he wanted to take continuous leave, except if SWAT was called. He was a member of the SWAT team, and he thought it was his duty and obligation to be there to support his teammates, and so he asked for a continuous block, except for SWAT. The sheriff approved, and we granted that. So, all right, and Kurt, this goes to what you were talking about. FMLA runs from plan year to plan year. So it's a method determined by the employer in Shawnee County that determined that we go from one pay period year to one pay period year. So our FMLA plan year started on December 22nd, 2018, and it will go till December 20th, 2019. So it's payroll year to payroll year. But the law says that it can be any combination. It can be any of those as long as it's consistent across all employees. When I worked for Walmart, we used a rolling 12-month period measured forward. So basically, it was independent to every employee. If I began my FMLA tomorrow, February 8th, then I would have my plan year from February 8th, 2019 until February 7th, February 6th, 2020. So, but Shawnee County does not do it that way. Again, in red, pay period to pay period.
So in our situation, if someone knew they were having a major surgery or something, they would be able to wait until the end of the year, and they might be able to double their FMLA time.
Yes, they could. Just the way that our plan years go. They would be able to use, if they planned it right, they would use 480 hours, then they would have to recertify, and then they would have 480 more hours. But then once they hit that limit, they're done for the year. Any other questions? So, substitution of paid leave. Basically, substitution of paid leave goes down to this. FMLA doesn't pay anything. It is not a paid status. So employees can substitute vacation, sick, annual leave, personal leave days, etc. to get paid for the time while they're on FMLA. We allow them to do so. They can substitute paid leave and run it in conjunction with their FMLA time. It doesn't extend their FMLA time. They still get the 480 hours. But once they're out of sick leave, once they're out of vacation and comp time and personal leave, what do we offer to them then? Shared leave. If no one pledges any shared leave though, because shared leave is not a guarantee, if no one pledges shared leave, then what can you offer as department heads and appointing authorities? unpaid leave. So following the leave policy in the HR handbook. So what do we have to do as the employer? And the employer is a very broad term, but basically it means us, Shawnee County supervisors, the employer. We have to provide notice of FMLA. We have to maintain a group health insurance and help maintain the employee's group health insurance. We have to be able to restore that employee to the same job or equivalent and with the same wage and benefits. And we have to keep the records. Okay? That's our responsibilities as an employer.
On the maintain the health insurance, when they're on FMLA, they still just pay their portion,
Yes.
even if they have no sick leave, no annual leave, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's part of maintaining the group health insurance. We're going to still continue to pay the county's portion of it as if they were an employee that is on active status. They have to maintain their part. So if they have the family plan, they're paying the $500 some a month, typically paying it through the HR office.
If they're paid leave, or if they're leave without pay, where's this money gonna come from? What if they can't pay it?
Personal check. If they can't pay, then HR will discuss options with them. For example, taking the amount from their paycheck when they come back from active status, or doubling down on the amount taken from the paycheck through weekly payroll deduction once they're back on active status, if they can't come in and make the bi-monthly or bi-weekly payment, I should say, weekly payments or.
So we've never really looked for somebody that said, sorry, you just don't have any more health insurance.
We can't, because one of our responsibilities is to maintain them on group health insurance. So. All right, so a little bit deeper into providing general notice. Everybody's probably seen the FMLA packets, and the second part of this will kind of work through it. But we provide a notice, and we provide a notice. And then also, those departments that have hiring boards or hiring posters on bulletin boards, which everybody should, that notice is also out on the bulletin boards. And every time somebody gets an FMLA packet, it's in that packet. Every single packet goes with it. Electronic posting, distribution permitted. We put these out on the interweb so everybody can have them. Okay. CMP for willful posting violation, that's basically the Department of Labor coming in and saying, you guys did what you shouldn't do, and we're going to impose a penalty or fine on you. So one of our responsibilities is we have to provide a notice of rights and responsibilities. That's there also. Okay? We put that into the letter, and it addresses the key issues. Basically, what is FMLA to the employee, what do they qualify for, and gives the legal. So then, also one of our responsibilities is we have to provide the employee, notice of eligibility and notice of designation. This is the letter that comes from HR saying you are eligible for FMLA, you've been approved for FMLA in this type. Here's what you need to do while you're on FMLA, and here's what you have to do to come back. We'll get to that. So, again, going back to the group health plan, one of our responsibilities after we tell the employee that, hey, you've been approved for leave and here's your designated leave, etc. There's a blurb in our letter that talks about what is the employee's responsibility to maintain their group health. So key here is, I wonder if this works, how it works. Same terms and conditions as if the employee were continuously employed. We can't change up the health insurance plan on it. Okay, we can't say, oh, you're out on FMLA, so you owe double. Can't do that. But the employee has to pay their share of the premium. Okay. if you guys run into any questions or issues with that, where the employee says, man, I'm gonna be on leave without pay, I don't know where the money's gonna come from. I don't have Aflac, I don't have anything set aside. Direct them over to Human Resources. We have to work with them, we will work something out. I do want to skip to the bottom here. The employee, under the FMLA statutes, if they don't ever return to their job, and we've been paying their health insurance, and they said, yeah, I'll double up when I get back, but I never get back, there is legal recourse that we can take to recover those premiums. So, job restoration, we talked briefly that it has to be the same job, equivalent pay, equivalent benefits, equivalent terms and conditions. Okay? Part of the whole intent of FMLA is I don't have to worry about my job while I'm taking care of an issue. And I can come back and my job will be there. And if it isn't there, it's a position that they have to fill immediately because it's a highly needed position, I am going to be restored to a job that I'm going to be making the same pay and get the same benefits. So I don't have to worry about where my next paycheck's coming. That's one of the key things on how FMLA takes care of our employees. It takes care of us. We are our own employees also. Out of all the slides, there's 58 slides in this presentation, and out of all the slides, this is probably the biggest. Remember it, let it burn into your head. So that's why I made it in red. So, we as employers cannot interfere with, restrain, or deny employees' FMLA rights. That means I can't go up to somebody and say, I know you asked for FMLA, but we can just work something out. You don't really need FMLA. We'll just work with your days off or something. Can't do that. We can't say, well, didn't you have an FMLA last year? What makes you think you're going to get one this year? Okay. There's a lot of ways, and it's very broad, but anytime that an employer could be seen as interfering with or restraining an employee from using FMLA, that could run us aground into problems. Okay? So, number 2, you can't discriminate or retaliate against an employee for having exercised FMLA rights. Sorry, Kurt, I'm not going to give you that promotion. You've had FMLA, and it took you out of the department way too much, and so because of that, no.
Nice guy.
You didn't know what the promotion was. So, basically, it goes hand in hand with the county's existing discrimination policies. Do we tolerate discrimination in any shape or form? Do we tolerate retaliation? No. So, and we shouldn't. Point 3, discharge or in other ways discriminate against an employee because of an involvement in any proceeding related to FMLA. Ties very much into point number 2. But basically, this is, hey, I'm going to get rid of them because they took FMLA. I'm going to find some reason they will not work for me. And then lastly, use FMLA, taking of FMLA leave as a negative factor in employment actions. What's an employment action? Hiring, firing, evaluating, reprimanding, promotion, demotion, are all employment actions. FMLA usage can't tie into any of those. Should not tie into any of those, right? If any slide sticks with you, let these 4 points stick with you, because this is very broad. It's painting with a roller when maybe we're used to painting with a tiny little paintbrush, but anything that can be grouped into here, we probably need to tread very, very carefully. All right, so kind of going through this, maintaining records. We know that this is one of the employer's responsibilities. Does this all fall on HR? No. Basic payroll information.
My life a lot easier.
Basic payroll information is entered into, we all know it and love it, executive time. And so we use executive time as the raw source data for all the FMLA data that we generate. So whether it be usage or expiration letters or year-end letters, all of that rolls up. We use one solution to kind of aggregate some of that. Dates FMLA leave is taken. Again, that's dependent on the information entered into executive time. Hours of leave, if it's taken, again, this is an executive time record. Copies of leave notices. These are maintained in the employee's personnel files in HR. Okay. If you have copies in a departmental file and you haven't sent HR maybe the dissemination form or the application form or FMLA forms, you just maybe forward a copy. Please make sure that all FMLA related paperwork makes go over to HR. Not saying that has happened. Okay, it has. Documents describing benefits and policies. So, HR policy manual. It's our responsibility to archive any previous HR policy manuals. Angela, that's going to be really tough because we've had 2 policy manuals in the last 12 years. So, we need to make sure that both revisions are on file. But this has to do with anything. We keep an archive of the group health insurance that we offer and how it differed from year to year to year to year. And we keep basically all these records in HR and any personnel file records in their employees' separate personnel files as well. Premium payments. So this is tracked in human resources when the employee pays separately. You know, they're on leave, they have no leave. Otherwise, it's tracked through the paycheck data. We can see how much an employee paid throughout the year for group health insurance. We can see that while they were in FMLA, they had group health insurance, and we can prove that to an investigator that, yes, we did not knock them off group health insurance because they were on FMLA. And finally, any records of any disputes, emails, letters, anything like that would be maintained also, if there would be a case for it. So, after all that exhausting talk, we talked about what the employer has to do. Now let's talk about what the employee has to do. What if I'm on that opposite end and I'm not the supervisor, but I'm the employee receiving FMLA? So, I have to provide pretty timely notice of my need for FMLA. But we talked earlier, I don't have to come out and say, I want FMLA, do I? Will, if I tell you, hey, I'm going to be in the hospital starting Monday, you say, all right, man, good luck. What do you do?
If it were me, I'd be courteous just to show proof. If it were me, on FMLA.
But you're the
Employee, that's what I'm doing.
you're the employee, but you don't come out to your supervisor and say, hey, I got to go on FMLA, so I need some paperwork. But the employee simply says, hey, I'm going to be in the hospital.
I'd offer FMLA.
There you go. And the employee, once they provide the leave, then they have to provide the certification to support the need. We ask for medical certification in every pack to be consistent and fair. If the employer requests, they have to provide the periodic reports. Hey, I'm alive and doing fine. I plan on returning to work on this date. And when they come back from continuous leave, we'll talk about that, they have to provide a type of fitness for duty certification. It's going to be as simple as a doctor's note saying that Mike is released to full duty without restrictions as far as this date. And that would suffice. So A little bit deeper into notice requirements. Probably the biggest thing that to glean out of all of this would be consulting with the employer regarding the scheduling of planned medical treatment. Because that takes care of several things. If I know that I have planned medical treatment, i.e. a surgery or ongoing medical treatment, and working with the employer needs to know when you're going to be gone, right? Not just, hey, I'm going to be gone sometime in the future, but when am I going to be gone? Right there. And then complying with the employer's usual and customary procedural requirements. We can't have packets A, B, and C, and some people that we like, we give packet A to, and some people that we kind of like, we give packet B to, and maybe it has some more requirements. And those trouble causers, we give packet C to because it has all the stuff that we want them to do. All the hoops to jump through. We have to do what is usual and customary. This is usual and customary.
As a employer, what right do you have as, if you have a employee on FMLA for someone else? How come you don't have can't ask for a doctor to know that they're on FMLA for a family member having to go to an appointment, especially if they never pre-scheduled the appointment and just call in that day?
We'll get to that. That has to do with the certification. We can't ask for doctor's notes repeatedly, but we can ask for certification of that serious health condition of a family member, and we do ask for that. So, timing of the employee notice, we want the employee to notify us as soon as possible if it's in the future. But then, as soon as practical is what is written into the law. And unforeseeable leave, I don't know that I'm going to have a car accident driving home tonight and that I might need FMLA. You know, I can't predict that. So whenever I'm able to, I come out of the coma, I'm probably going to get FMLA. So, I mentioned it in all of our packets. We have the standard, these are the Department of Labor forms, and we'll go through what is in the packet. But there's a 4-page form for the employee's serious health condition, and then there is another 4-page form for the family member's serious health condition. Okay? If I am filling out, and again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, I don't need both, right? If I'm in a car accident and I need FMLA, I don't need my family member's form filled out also. I turned out the slide. The difference is WH 380E and 380F. Now, I don't want to, get into what I just talked about and have different requirements. 380E, E for employee, 380F, F for family member. Gosh.
But if you're both in the car, you would have to fill out both.
It depends, yeah.
Right.
If I'm taking FMLA for my wife, but if I'm already injured and in a coma, those situations.
So if you both at home with one broken arm, one hand, a broken
Then I
leg.
would probably have an FMLA to care for my wife also. Depends on how well I liked her on that day. Right? No. Basically, we give at least 15 calendar days, and we can extend that. Oh, you're in the hospital. Oh, hey, you won't see your specialist until, conditions like that. We want the medical certification back within a reasonable time, though. However, we have to give at least 15 days for the employee to get that medical certification back to us. We can't give it to them today and say, oh, you can get it back tomorrow. Sorry. And then if we see, once we get it back, and we find that the doctor said, I don't know, how do you write anything up about that? How do you determine what type of FMLA leave is required? So then we have 7 days to tell the employee to go back and talk to a doctor I don't know and give me the adequate forms. Annual certification may be required. we talked about this. Our plan year goes from payroll to payroll. And so for those that did not turn in prior to, we send out a bulk mailing at the beginning of January saying, hey, if you are intending on keeping your medical, your intermittent family medical leave or having a family medical leave, then here's the paperwork for your courtesy. Okay. The employee pays everything for this FMLA certification. I had a question. An employee came in actually just a few weeks ago and said, hey, my doctor charges $20 to fill out this form. How do I get reimbursed? Sorry. Now, there are conditions if we ask for recertification or second opinion, third opinions, then that is carried by the employer. All right, so we get the medical form back. The employer, us, but not the direct supervisor, can call, and we can call basically to say, hey, did you really fill this out? Because it looks, I have my doubts. Or we can call and say, hey, Dr. So-and-so, what did you write? Because I can't read your writing. But what we can't do is say, are you really sure that Trish needs to be gone for this amount of time? Or should it be a little bit less? Or could it be more? You know? We can't request any additional information. We can authenticate and clarify, but not add or subtract. And then we do have the option as the employer, and the employee has to abide by this. If we say, hey, we want a second opinion, okay, that's at our cost. And if the second opinion comes back and says one thing, and we say, oh, man, I'm still doubting that, we can get a third and final opinion, again, at the cost of Shawnee County. Yes, ma'am.
Whereas the second opinion has a completely different timeline than the first.
That's where we would probably go to the third opinion and say, you know, hey, we've got this, let's fall in the middle maybe?
If you have to ask them to recertify, clearly it's because they violated, so why would you be liable for it?
Not necessarily. There are several recertification conditions, and we'll talk about that. This is if the initial came in and we as the employer felt that maybe that opinion wasn't what we believe. Maybe they said, hey, this employee has no need for medical FMLA, and we know that they are stumbling and falling off a truck because they can't maintain their balance due to a vertigo condition. And we say, no, you can't be hanging on the back of the truck. You need to be taking some leave in your best interest.
Well, a person is allowed to be on twice a week, or call them 4 times a week for FMLA, then would that fall on you as the HR?
That would be a different situation. That would be a cause for the supervisor to say, hey, I'm going to request recertification, but we'll get to that in a second. There's my second. So, what we can't do as the employer, the employee has to provide certification. We ask that in our initial packet, they produce medical certification by seeing their medical provider, the doctor, whatever. What we can't do is say, okay, we need it again, and again, and again, without cause. So we can't ask for recertification more often than every 30 days. If the employee is gone for 30 days, or let's say they're gone for a month and a half, we have to wait until that initial minimum 30 days is expired, passed, before we can come back and say, okay, now we need you to recertify. And we have to have a reason. Basically, the reasons boil down to, and probably the one that everybody kind of keys in on, the employer receives information that casts doubt on the reason for the leave. I'm on FMLA intermittently because of a chronic health condition. Today my asthma flared up and I'm just not, I'm gonna be at home. Oh, but Johnny Joe saw me down at Walmart shopping, and then I was eating out, and so could that cast doubt for the employer whether or not Mike is using his FMLA the way he should? It could. And the employer has the right then at that point to request a recertification. One thing that came up and comes up constantly is, can I request a doctor's note every time somebody goes for an appointment or calls in sick using FMLA? Fill that to everybody. Can I request a doctor's note?
No.
Okay. Any yeses? The answer is no. Courts have decided that that would be an undue burden under the FMLA Act, and that it would violate the recertification no more than 30 days. Because in essence, it's a little mini certification every time you're requesting that doctor's note. So if you have supervisors saying, well, you want to use your FMLA, Mike? I need a doctor's note. Just remember, bring me that doctor's note. Could they be treading on thin ice? Could they be putting Shawnee County and your department in jeopardy? It could be. So, also we can request recertification if the employee brings in a doctor's note that is completely different than what they initially brought, or if they come to you and say, "Yeah, I need more time." So all of that changes how the leave is, and then we go back through the process. One of the employee's responsibilities, they have to provide certification, but also they have to provide periodic status reports. What does that mean? It means that when we call them, they have to answer our phone calls and respond to us. They don't have to be waiting on the end of the line or anything like that, but they do have to respond to our requests about well-being and the status of their leave. They can't just blow you off for 90 days because they're on leave for 90 days. Yes, sir.
Into kind of a little bit of a gray area there. I remember going to a class on this with the state of Kansas, and being given an example where the supervisor was concerned about the employee and called the employee and asked how they were doing. The employee then filed a complaint because that was interpreted as pressure to come back to work.
It could be.
As putting pressure on the employee to get back as soon as possible. Therefore, their recommendation is you really don't want to be calling on a regular basis asking what's going on and when you're going to show up again.
Good point.
You're better off just saying, keep me informed and then leave it up to the employee.
So in our letter that we send out, I don't have a copy of the letter, but in one of the sections, there's a checkbox. And it says the employee has to or has not, or something. I don't really remember the exact term, the exact word, but either I have to provide monthly reports or does not have to provide monthly reports. And that's what it's.
Just be careful when you start calling it bad or damn.
Because also that's seen as requesting recertifications more often than 30 days.
So is it up to HR to make the phone call or up to the supervisor to make the phone call to check on them?
Typically, unless a supervisor or department head says, hey, I'm concerned, I haven't gotten a monthly report from Johnny Joe for 2 months. Nobody's heard from him, anything like that. I need to know when he's coming back because his due date to come back is, in 3 days, and he hasn't provided anything like that. HR or send letters.
So like Mr. Ma was saying, we just wait for them to check in with us, and if they don't,
Yeah.
then we let you guys know.
And
And
in
you
the-
guys call them.
Yeah, in the letter that we send out, in most cases, we are not expecting them to provide monthly reports unless it's a very long-term they're using 12 weeks of FMLA, then we'll ask for the updates. Otherwise, if we're requesting monthly updates and they're only gone 3 weeks, there's not really a point in that.
But I'm sorry, it doesn't have to be 30 days though. I mean, the updates could come weekly, right?
They're not supposed to. A periodic update in Shawnee County's letter is a update of every 30 days. And again, that ties in with the recertification, not asking for recertification of the FMLA more than 30 days.
So what if the expected leave is uncertain? I mean, I don't know when they would be able to come back to work. I think we had a situation where we had a weekly update, right or wrong.
But it depends on the relationship that you have with the person too. I mean, people who often get along, of course, we don't want to be violating any rules, but some people like for their boss to call and check on them and just see how they're doing, or someone else in the department to reach out to them.
I would say that, we probably need to stick to the monthly update, the periodic update, unless it was stipulated in some type of writing saying, Johnny Joe will check in every 2 weeks.
Email count,
What's that?
email count. Does email count?
Email, all forms of communication does count.
But the employee could voluntarily,
The employee can
Contact you.
voluntarily
Yeah.
contact all day long, every day, and say, I'm no better than yesterday, I'm a little bit better than the day before. I see one other hand. The last part of that, the intent to return to work. In our letter, we asked that the employee gives us 2 days. If they're on a continuous leave, that they give us 2 days. I mean, why is that important? Well, number one, give us a heads up that they're coming back. Number two, maybe we need to give them a schedule, and do a little bit of rearranging because we haven't had them on a schedule, and now we need to integrate them back in, make some arrangements with them. So, but we do ask for a 2-day notice that they're returning to work. And then before they return to work, on continuous leaves, and this is not permissible during intermittent leaves for the most part, we ask that they bring back a fitness for duty. And again, I mentioned earlier, it can be as simple as a doctor's note. Okay? Saying that I can return to duty, I am at my maximum medical improvement, and that I'm coming back with restrictions, without restrictions, whatever the case might be. Okay. Now, if the employee comes back and, not getting into FMLA 201, but this is where it can tie into the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and making accommodations for employees that have existing conditions that may inhibit a work function. Okay? And when an employee comes back and they produce a fitness for duty, they bring it to HR, we'll call the supervisor, we'll call the department and say, can you accommodate, can you not accommodate? And then at that point, if there is we can't accommodate that, that's where then we go to the fitness for duty policy, find out in the HR handbook, and then we work down that. Okay. Different process, not to muddy the water. Again, intermittent leaves, we don't ask for a fitness of duty. Let's think about it, we would be asking for a doctor's note every single time that they were out and came back. And what did we talk about just 7 minutes ago? Too much recertification. So. And then, along with this, the employee is responsible for the cost. So, in the last hour, what did we learn about? We learned about the employers, which employers are covered, which employees are covered. Okay. It's a pop quiz. if I can shut it out, I've been here 6 months. I need FMLA.
No.
Why not? Oh, okay. What reasons qualify for a leave? I want to go to Florida.
To do what?
Nice,
Oh,
nice, because it could be, I want to go to Florida to get treatment for my cancer. So, very good.
Huh?
Now, just going to Florida to go see Disneyland, probably not. I need 6 months off.
12 weeks.
12 weeks, or how many hours, because we don't measure in 480. We had it in green on the slide, right? A number, it's subliminal, I want it burned into your all's heads. We talk about what the employer can't do, we talk about what the employee can't do. We had a lot of good questions.
What if it goes beyond the 12 weeks?
What if it goes beyond the 12 weeks? What department heads have ever encountered that? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Our policy is, we don't ask any questions as long as they're on the family. If they get beyond 12 weeks and they no longer have any leave left, any comp, and it's all without pay, then they are subject to discipline because of attendance. We don't, they essentially have run themselves out of any ability to be absent and paid. It's unpaid, and we're not on FMLA, so we can then restart process discipline for attendance.
I would say that's one way that it can be handled.
And they become
My
absent.
bigger recommendation is working with the employee, finding out why they would need and to have more leave and possibly extending the departmental leave of absence.
Well, we do that, that's
Yeah.
part of the process.
Oh.
We don't just ignore it, say, well, FMLA.
I was going to say,
No, you start the process. You start the process of this, what I call discipline, which is counseling with the employee. How's this going to get corrected? If it continues, then you go to the next step. And eventually they can walk themselves right out the door if they don't, if it continues. It's not a matter of not giving them what they're due under the law, but it is possible as an employee to become unemployable because you can't come to work for very good reasons.
very true.
And you're not letting them go because you don't like them. You're letting them go because
They're not,
they can't work.
so
It's as simple as that.
if the situation comes down, then of course, consult with HR and we'll work through all of it. The offer of having a departmental leave of absence is always out there. That's at the department head or the appointing authority's discretion. There's a lot of avenues to help somebody out. Basically going back to the medical, harm. Somebody had a stroke and they spent 3 months in the hospital, and that they're going to need a couple more months before they are, ready to return to work. That might be a situation that, a departmental leave of absence is offered up, and, we're working with that employee to restore them to their employment. But then, as you said, it does become a point that they're not fit for duty, and then we have to work through the fitness for duty and the disciplinary. Does that answer your question, kind of?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
With what he asked, how does that work in with the time frame to give them a chance to recertify? If they run out?
Now, just because they run out of 480 hours of FMLA leave, they don't get the chance to recertify then.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that they've exhausted 480 hours or 12 weeks worth of FMLA leave in any given plan year, and they have a medical condition that extends beyond that, then that's a case-by-case basis.
Unless they straddle two paid years.
Unless something happens where they cross plan
And
years.
in our case, they used all of their time up in the first part of the year. And frankly, it had been a continuing thing where boom, 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 but then they used every bit of it up. Just,
So that's the only time you're not eligible for FMLA?
When you use it all up.
Yeah.
No.
What makes, I was trying to look through your, when you went to the slides, at what point do you guys ever deny it? On a FMLA, once it comes to you?
I'll open this up. So,
Well, no, now-
if I work with the county for a year, and I've invested 1,250 hours, am I eligible for FMLA? How many hours am I eligible for if I can prove a serious medical condition? Once I hit 480 hours of FMLA, and I've exhausted all of my FMLA leave, then it's on a case-by-case basis.
Well, I don't understand that. We're not doctors, I know some people use it, but that's not our call. But I was curious.
Mike, we're kind of obligated, if they can find a doctor that's certified for FMLA, they're good to go, right? I mean,
Well, unless we completely disagree with that opinion.
Well, then you get 3 shots at it, second opinion, third opinion,
Yeah.
but if you don't get a doctor that says,
The third opinion is binding.
but if they can find a doctor, which is not hard to do, basically, they're gonna get it, FMLA.
They could,
What would be the example if a doctor said he's qualified, if you would get it?
If it's their second, if they've gone beyond their 12 weeks and they have another condition.
Well, that means they've used their 480, so that's a whole different thing. They're
Right,
just not
but
even eligible anymore.
Say it's October and then they end up in the hospital again, they would, and fill out FMLA, then that FMLA would have to be denied because they've already utilized it for a different condition.
that's one case, yeah.
Until January, if they were still had.
Well, and as a department, you could give them leave. You could give them leave if you saw that it was a situation if you could bridge. You can work with them, and we have. But basically, if they're eligible for any of the time, and they have a doctor that is willing to sign off on it,
Saying
I'm
that
pretty
they
sure
have a
they're
serious
gonna
medical
do it.
condition.
They
Does
did.
the second, third opinion be more for the time than if they're eligible? I mean, as long as you have one that says they're eligible, they're
Then-
pretty much eligible.
Then they're eligible.
It's more of the timeline
Yes,
with
and how
the
they're using
second
it.
and third opinion.
The biggest thing without, narrowing down, because FMLA, just like everybody else, I mean, everybody has their own conditions, their own circumstances. It is a case-by-case basis. Now, doing this for the last 10 months and dealing with it in my past career, people typically aren't abusing FMLA. They have legitimate reasons why they need to go. Okay? At the beginning of the presentation, I talked about, how I was a co-manager about 4 years ago. I was just getting out of the hospital. I had to use FMLA for 3 months. Because sitting in my car in November of 2015, on the last day after Black Friday, I had a stroke. And I spent the first month in the hospital. I spent the second month in the hospital. The third month out of the hospital, in and out of bed, in and out of what could be intermittent, but I was still at home because I couldn't go to work. And in this case, my company worked with me right to the very T. They followed FMLA. I had no problems, and I told them, hey, here's how I'm doing, because they asked how I was. They asked that I provide monthly updates, and so I did that. And so, there are legitimate reasons, and I myself believe that because I was one of them, that without that FMLA protection, I might not have a job then. So this is very personal to me.
There's also doctors that's involved in this, and they're scared that they don't want to have a lawsuit against them. Everybody in here knows that there is misuse of FMLA.
There can be, and it goes on. And if you look on the internet for FMLA, you're going to find every law firm and then some talking about all the misuse and everything to that extent. But what I'm here to tell you today and try to get into your mind, don't think about the negative aspects of FMLA. That one person that's abusing it in your department, or the 2 people. Think about the 10 people you helped by facilitating that FMLA for them and making sure that they were not worried about their job when they're in the hospital or when they're in the hospital with their kid who's fighting cancer, that they're not worried about the job and where their livelihood is coming from because, hey, my department head, my authority, they got my back. Okay? Think of the positive aspects of what FMLA does for not only your department, but your employees. Okay? Deal through the issues with those ones that may be using, misusing, and abusing. Okay? But remember all the people you are helping by making sure FMLA is happening in your departments. Those are the people that you truly want to invest all your time and talent and spending the last hour and 15 minutes with me today to learn about this a little bit more. That's who you're helping. And that is, I might be naive, but I truly believe everybody, that is taking out FMLA has a reason that they're taking it out.
Out of the 100 and some odd people countywide that we had on FMLA last year, we only had, 3 people that we had recertified?
We had 113 people seek FMLA out of all the county employees last year. And we received in HR, both the time that I've done it and the time previous, we received 3 recertification requests from departments saying that we don't think that so-and-so is using this properly. So don't think about the 3, think about the 110 that.
I'll also kind of add to that as being I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm just,
As being a cancer survivor, I know that if you're working for an employer that works through you with, a health issue with you, that instills a loyalty to that employer that you can't buy.
Yeah.
I mean, just common sense and working with you, like I say, that just instills a loyalty that is very important and priceless.
How do you put the time into exec time? How is that? Do you just put it in as sick, vacation, is that on the FMLA paperwork that tells you how the employee wants it?
Oh, okay, I'm getting, basically timekeepers, raise your hand if you're a timekeeper. How do you what code do you use for FMLA?
I don't know the number, but it's FMLA.
it says FMLA.
Yeah.
FMLA hours. So then one solution pulls that data from executive time that we use in HR to compile our usage.
So you just put it
We
as
had
FMLA.
to put in like the sick leave and then put in FMLA, so you had 2 listings per day.
Yeah, because FMLA doesn't pay us.
Depends on what they're taking,
Yep.
yeah. But I had a question about that also. You said that you have 15 days to get the paperwork back, all that stuff. What happens if, I give somebody paperwork, they fill it out, I send those 2 sheets over to you guys. From there, I don't know that they've been approved or not until I get something back from you. And it could be
Are they
3
eligible?
weeks later. I don't know, because I'm not asking.
No. They're eligible for FMLA if they have 1 year of service, 1,250 hours, and they work for a covered employer. So it would be, you would err on the side that it would be FMLA because they're saying, hey, this is for a serious medical condition. We can apply the time retroactively. Law says we can apply it retroactively. We code it as FMLA, best practice in the county, we code it as FMLA. We can always pull that code out if they say, no, that wasn't the case. But we err on the side of they are seen as eligible, they've submitted the paperwork, we're waiting on medical verification to say how long, how much leave that they get.
And the other spectrum of that, they got tons of leave. They don't really want to fill out FMLA paperwork.
And again, I think you had mentioned earlier in the presentation, we can't force them to
Correct.
fill out FMLA paperwork.
So at that point, do
But
I
it
code it
is-
FMLA or do I not code it FMLA?
You would not. It's incumbent, okay, we have given the employee the paperwork. They've never returned it. As long as we can prove, if called into question, we can prove that I have offered FMLA to them. It was not covered under FMLA because I offered it, and they never returned anything on an application, on a publication. They even said, I don't want to use it. Best practice would be, get that in writing, saying, I don't want to use FMLA.
So I guess that's what I'm getting at is, I'll know if they're covered or not, but I don't know if they're gonna fill out the paperwork, so at that point, I don't really wanna put in FMLA if they're not gonna return any paperwork.
If they say, hey, I'm going into the hospital, it's FMLA, then we can go that way. I can see how it would be a gray area. What have you guys done in the past?
I've waited for the paperwork to come from you, actually,
But what if they never turn in anything?
then it doesn't get coded FMLA.
Okay. What if they turn it in a month later
Then I look at the date and I do pass.
and we record that as FMLA?
Right.
And that would be
Better,
acceptable
exactly.
under retroactive. So I guess, my thought is, if you know for sure that it's going to be an FMLA issue, code it as FMLA, because they've told you. If there's any doubt in your mind, make sure you're documenting it, so you don't forget to go back and code it. If they do turn in that paperwork 2 months later and they say, yeah, I was seen on this date and this date and this date and this date by this doctor for this chronic condition, and then they're using the law and reapplying it retroactively, that we don't miscalculate how the employee is using their FMLA.
When you're on FMLA, are you required to use sick leave first or can you use vacation?
You can, as a practice that we have, typically sick and then vacation. There might be circumstances where they've drawn down all their sick and they have just a little bit of sick time left. And they say, no, use my vacation. I would say be able to work with the employee on
Okay,
that.
I didn't know if that was something on your end that we had to do, because we've got a
No.
lot of people with more vacation than what they're ever gonna get paid for. And they prefer to use their vacation time because they're gonna get paid for their sick leave when they retire.
Yeah, typically,
So-
it's sick, then vacation, and then comp time, personal leave day, things like that.
But if they wanna use vacation, they can,
They can't.
when they're on FMLA.
I thought you
As
couldn't
long as-
substitute vacation for sick or sick for vacation.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. As long as if they're in a bargaining unit,
They are,
and their union contract says that they can't substitute.
oh, okay, well, but
So,
But they ask for vacation.
that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
into. This is, these are people that don't need FMLA, they've got tons of time on the books.
I would say, instead of a general rule, then we need to deal with those people on a case-by-case basis, because it does make a difference if you're in a bargaining unit or classified on how you can substitute and whether or not you can substitute. And which bargaining unit, because some bargaining units do allow it still,
Right.
and others it's expressly put in the contract, no substitutions allowed.
Well, if I don't know that they're doing something and they want a week of vacation,
Yeah, I
then
mean,
they're not
they haven't come to
substituting
you and
because we don't
said,
know that that's
yeah, they
what
haven't
want.
said, hey, Tanya, I got a serious medical condition and I'm requesting FMLA and a week of vacation.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. But I mean, that's some of the questions I have to tell you with different HR directors, we've done things differently throughout the years. So at one point in time, we had ladies who were pregnant, got FMLA, but it didn't start until after the birth of the babies. Then a new HR director would come in and say, no, FMLA starts when you go to your doctor's appointments, your prenatal doctor's appointments.
And
Then
as
we
we've
also
seen,
had an HR director that said if they're having surgery, they have to take FMLA. now we've got a different set of rules again. So nothing against you guys, I'm just saying through the years past, since I've been here for so long, there's just been so many changes that,
Interpretations
Yes.
and such.
And
But
that was affecting
as we
insurance
saw,
was not
up on the,
covered.
going to the pregnancy thing, prenatals and appointments can be included in that. And so, would you want to start a continuous block of FMLA at the first prenatal appointment? No. But that could be an intermittent, and then the baby's born, and I take, 4 weeks off. And then for any post-birth appointments that I might have follow-ups, I can take that, and take that, and take that, and take that, and have it all covered in my plans.
And I would just say, if we're ever gonna err, we wanna err on the side of the employee in this situation. We wanna take care of them, that's what we're here for.
yeah. Well, I actually had somebody upset with me because I forced them to take FMLA based off of what HR told us to do. This was before you guys. Very upset.
Well,
It's like-
it would depend on their leave time, I would think, because, FMLA is to protect your job.
She had
If
plenty.
you're gonna ask for 3 weeks off,
Yeah. No, she had plenty of leave.
you don't have to give them 3 weeks off. And but if they file FMLA, then you do.
Now it's nice to know that they're not required to take it, they don't have to take it, all we can do is offer it to them.
I think I had cancer 10 years ago, I don't think I took FMLA. If I remember right, just did it as time needed, and,
You work with a good guy.
yeah, I don't have a boss like you.
I know this sounds odd, but the odd has is it possible for
Yes.
somebody to be taking FMLA leave without pay, even though they have vacation time and sick leave? They can work with the department and take unpaid leave and hold that back. They're not required to use up their time,
Most employees won't because they don't get a paycheck with FMLA.
but it's possible.
But it is possible, if I'm independently wealthy, then basically it's, can I take FMLA as unpaid?
Yeah.
The law allows,
You couldn't,
I didn't
I
think
thought
you
you
could.
could. You couldn't. Previously, that was not allowed.
yeah, no, that goes back to the substitution, is we don't, we can use, the county allows us to pay, use our leave time and everything to cover, but FMLA does not have to be paid. I mean, it doesn't have to be.
Then how different is that than, like Tanya was talking about, they don't want to apply for FMLA? You exhaust all your time, okay? Oh, gosh, now I need 12 weeks of FMLA, but now you're gonna get shared leave. So how's that different by going?
You don't get shared leave. You can't use shared leave until you've
You've exhausted
exhausted
all
all
your
your sick and vacation.
Right, but they've already
everything like that.
exhausted it because they didn't want to apply for FMLA, but now, now I want to go ahead and apply for FMLA because I don't have any more time and I want to stay off. So now we have 12 weeks or 480 hours,
Mhm.
but we don't have any time in order to get paid for it, now we apply for shared leave.
And that is fully applicable within the county policy. Because we can't hinder anybody from taking FMLA, even though they didn't before, that was their decision personally. But now they chose to use FMLA. So again, we as the employer can't hinder them from taking FMLA if they're eligible and they have the hours.
So you can start FMLA at any point in time, you don't have to start it at the beginning of this injury or illness or whatever, you can start it 3 months later, or, I mean, when you run out of vacation?
Let's say that, an employee has an illness, and they think, I can just manage this with my vacation and sick time. That's what it's there for, okay. Then they realize that, hey, I'm just not sick, I have cancer, and I need treatments, and this is gonna go on longer. And we've had those situations where an employee just thought, I'm just not feeling the greatest. And then all of a sudden they find out, oh, hey, I need dialysis. And then they file for FMLA, yes, and they can.
I'm still a little confused on what he said. So say someone has a baby or open heart surgery or something,
Okay,
and they are requesting the 12 weeks. They only have enough time to cover 9 weeks.
okay.
They would like to divide that evenly amongst the 12 weeks
Okay.
and have some sort of paycheck. They can do that now?
They could, I guess what they could do with departmental approval, because all vacation is subject to departmental approval, is say, hey, I want to use 10 hours of vacation this week and 10 hours of vacation next week and 10 hours of vacation the week after, all the way up to 120 hours of vacation. There's no rule or regulation saying I can't do that.
So they'd only get
So they
paid
could
for
like-
They'd only get paid for 10 hours, but they'd have something maybe to
Or like get
cover.
paid for 3 weeks 1 month, and 3 weeks the next month, and 3 weeks the next month, so they didn't run out of time.
Yeah, and in some ways, that might be smart if they know that they are going to be extended, a time extended for a long period of time, where I need to cover my medical, right? But I don't have any additional money coming in, I don't have anything in my savings account. You know, so they work it out, so they're not, man, I got $522 coming out this month and next month and the month after that because I can't pay my share of the medical. So I would say.
They can do that.
I would say if you had vacation time and you could work it out with the employee, yeah, they could. All vacation time, all annual leave is subject to the approval of the department head. So the department head says, hey, you can use 12 weeks and 12 weeks and 12 weeks and 12 weeks. I can't change the policy that the kids had to do.
And I was also gonna say, we have to remember shared leave isn't guaranteed. Shared leave is voluntary. Someone has to volunteer to give you hours, and unfortunately, everybody doesn't get them.
That's not how it used to work.
How did it used to work?
I mean, it goes back to like what she was saying previously. You had to exhaust all your time. You could not go.
And then I'd be in unpaid status. Let's say I exhaust all my time,
And then be unpaid.
and then I'd be in unpaid status and
And have no time.
I have no time whatsoever.
That's how it works.
Correct.
I guess I need to research on where that came from.
But this is way better. Be able to.
Well, I mean,
think that, okay,
again, it goes back to what Angela said, you know, if we're trying to help our employees, you know, we're right now all kind of thinking supervisor mode, what the desk turns, and we're on the employee side saying, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my medical bill without medical insurance, and I don't know how I'm gonna pay my medical insurance unless I have some money coming,
Or rent.
or rent, or for anything, so.
Okay. Well,
So again,
that's
if I have vacation time, you know, I would say that it would be best to work it out with the department head and saying, you know, how can I best utilize this? I know that I'm going to be gone at least 12 weeks. I'm hoping I'll be back in 12 weeks. How do I best use this time? So, I've got lots of department heads and elected officials in the room. What do you guys think? I mean, would you work with an employee like that? Or would you say, hey, no, you gotta use all your vacation and sick, and the next 3 months, you're on your own? Thanks, sister.
But isn't it kind of like a double whammy if you have all the time on the books, but if you're gonna be gone for more than 3 days, don't they say you're on FMLA? Isn't it a double whammy? You're using a day at FMLA, but you're still using a day of sick to get paid for it?
No, it's not a double whammy, because remember, FMLA is a status only.
It's a tracking.
It protects your job for that time. Basically, it says, for 12 weeks, my job is protected under federal law.
If you have
But it
12
doesn't
weeks-
pay me a dime.
If you have 12 weeks of time on the book, though, I thought it was a requirement that you had, if you're gonna miss more than a week consecutive, you had to do it. But if you have the time on the books, then you wouldn't need it until you ran out all your time.
There's people that, you know, they have a surgery, they don't take FMLA, they have buku sick leave, and they just cover it with sick leave, and they come back to work.
So,
Now, would I recommend that? Probably not.
okay, so with what you said though, if they tell me they have a surgery coming, or you said, I should
You as the employer should be handing them the FMLA paperwork, explaining to them the benefits of taking FMLA and putting it into their hands. And, you know, as long as you're documenting that you did that, you're fulfilling that role, but the government says employers have to offer up FMLA to employees.
I can't, is there a sheet in there that says, no, I do not want it, or yes? Yes.
No,
We
we don't have anything
in
like
packet,
that.
do we?
No,
Okay,
no opt-out.
okay.
You had mentioned earlier about, like a chronic health condition, if someone had high blood pressure, I think is what you said, and they had to go to 2 doctor appointments a year. What is the benefit of the employee to apply for FMLA for 1 extra, something like that? Because to me, I would hope everyone at least have 1 day of sick leave they could use. But what's the benefit of an employee to apply for FMLA for 1 extra doctor?
For those employees that don't have that sick leave.
Just for that alone?
I mean, you know, it goes back to, at the beginning of the presentation when I mentioned that before FMLA, there was no protections for you. So if you were in that situation, you had high blood pressure and it was, I only have to see the doctor a couple times a year, then it becomes, oh, I need to go to the doctor every week to monitor my blood pressure and my medicine. What protects you from that? Or what protects you from your employer saying, no, you can't be gone? Or you called in for this appointment, this appointment, this appointment, this appointment. Now you're looking at discipline under our attendance policy. Good question. Great question.
It's for people who work in the treasurer's office mainly.
Mike, the new payroll year recertification seems to drag out. Can you talk about that process?
We gave everybody until the 31st of January for those people that have had intermittent FMLA or they knew that they were going to take FMLA going on. Pretty much all of those are done back in process. So now, some people have turned in applications where they turn in the county application and say, hey, I need to get to my doctor, but my doctor can't see me until February 26th. Okay. Then, we provided the employee at least 15 days. We're working with the employee. They've given us notice, and so we went through that process. Again, that's case by case, individual by individual. It's not, oh, sorry, you're out of luck. Because if we do put that hard stopgap, well, you didn't turn it in by the 31st and you are not qualified for FMLA. What did I just do? I took away the right of the employee and I'm putting a great big roadblock in the way, hindering their way for FMLA.
I have another question. This came up, if someone calls in and says that they're sick and they don't have sick time to cover, but they're on FMLA, should we automatically assume that they really meant to say FMLA?
Would that employee have had an FMLA prior?
Yes and no. Yes and no, and it wasn't until they got recertified, when they were recertified.
Is the employee seeking FMLA currently?
Yeah, they did.
I would probably code it as FMLA.
Okay. Even if it's even if it's someone who has no time but on FMLA for a child or a family member.
Yeah.
And they try to say they meant FMLA. And
Could you say that again? They have no time for the,
if they had no time on the books
okay?
and they weren't aware, they forgot, and then they say it was supposed to be FMLA for a family member or a sick child, last minute, once they realize that's not what was said.
Sounds like that might be one where you have to call HR about. If somebody's changing.
We get that right.
Yeah.
Did they have vacation on the books?
Yeah, I think they might have time.
If they had time to cover, then maybe talking to the employees saying what's actually going on.
So for clarification,
There's no county policy that says that you have to take leave when you're gone,
And you have to
that you
take.
could take no pay instead of putting down.
I am
the
not
leave.
aware of anything that says that I have to take leave when I'm gone. Is anybody aware of any county
That's how
policy?
it used to be.
We're
So-
talking when you're on FMLA,
Yeah,
and when they're not.
Either or.
because if I'm on FMLA, FMLA is an unpaid, I mean, it is a status only. I am on FMLA leave, and it's inherently unpaid. So,
I think she's
Now-
saying that she's gonna be gone for a week, but she doesn't want to use her sick leave or vacation. She wants to take it no pay.
Like everybody was talking about before, you're saying there's no policy for that.
I'm not aware of any policy.
Can you make an office policy for that versus a county policy, and can officers have their own policy on that?
Or an elected official who could approve your leave without pay, but for most people, why would you want leave without pay if you have leave time on the
That's
books?
why you can ask me.
Yeah.
Because they were all talking about it earlier, and I
Well, she
just.
had a good explanation as to why, because she wants to spread it out to the term of her pregnancy.
Now, in the HR policy handbook, it does say, and this is separate from FMLA, talking about leave without pay. And leave without pay is another term for leave of absence also. The way that it's written in the handbook, it doesn't say leave of absence, it says leave without pay. And that a department head or or elected official, an appointing authority, can permit a leave without pay, leave of absence, to an employee at the department head or elected official's discretion. However, down at the end of it, it says, no leave without pay will be granted as long as the employee has vacation or sick. Is that where we're getting
Yeah, but that's
some
not what you
confusion
can't
on?
use leave without pay.
Because FMLA is different than leave without pay.
Yeah, but can you use leave without pay?
As long as you got
If you're on
that.
FMLA,
If I'm classified and I fall under the HR policy manual, it says that I can't have leave without pay without first using my vacation
Okay,
and
so
my
in
sick.
her
so then that,
situation,
my scenario then
the answer is no.
would be no.
Remind me of your situation.
I know I'm gonna be gone for 12 weeks, and I only have 9 weeks of leave. Can I opt to be paid 3 weeks, not be paid 1 week, be paid 3 weeks, not be paid 1 week, be paid 3 weeks, not be paid 1 week, and then come back to work?
Are you on FMLA or are you
Yes.
on leave without pay? And when I say leave without pay, again, this is where we get
FMLA.
confused.
FMLA.
Okay, I'm on an FMLA. When I say leave without pay, think leave of absence. Okay? Because in the county policy, there is not a policy for leave of absence. The section is titled leave without pay. If you are on FMLA, yes, you can do that. Because you're on FMLA.
If you're not on FMLA, though.
If I am not on FMLA,
It would be, have to be, that leave without pay,
yes.
and that would have to be approved.
Unless you
And
recover.
you have
and
to
the
use
provision
everything else
says,
first.
in the section, it's the very last sentence, it says, no leave without pay will be approved if you have available sick, vacation, et cetera.
So, the scenario that I had where you are in the that provision doesn't count. If you are FMLA, you want to take that time off without pay, the department head can grant that.
Leave without pay is inherently just leave without pay. We use the term leave without pay in the county. In other places, it's leave of absence. They're two different. FMLA, leave of absence.
I know she said you have to do that, but I think maybe we're commingling things here. Should be commingled. Because if you are FMLA and I grant you leave without pay, you're saying,
Well,
You don't have to grant them leave without pay during that.
okay, so what
They
you're
just,
saying, all
they
they
just
have
get
to-
that by
What
law.
what you're saying is, all they have to say is, don't pay me for those hours. And it's not a decision to
Yeah.
be approved or not approved. All they have to do is say, don't pay me. I'll take
If
my- I'll
if
take it
they're
without
on
pay.
FMLA.
If they're on FMLA in their 480 hours of protected time.
If they're
Because it
not,
goes
then
back
it's
to
just-
that slide with the dollar sign substitution. And the law allows for you to run parallel, FMLA and vacation, so I get a paycheck. FMLA and sick time, so I get a paycheck. The law allows for that. It doesn't say you have to, but it allows for that.
So it seems like this would be another reason for an employee to apply for FMLA, to give them the opportunity to do what you're talking about. If they don't apply for that and they're not certified for that,
Then
then that is not an option.
they would fall under the counting leave of, again, we call it leave without pay. And a leave without pay can be, hey, I don't have any time on the books. That's leave without pay. Technically, you know, if I don't have any time whatsoever and I have 2.34 hours, the department head can say, okay, I can grant you 2.34 hours of leave without pay for that day.
Yeah, but if they are not on FMLA, they have to use all their time first.
Yes, before a leave without pay can
Or
be
a leave
granted.
without pay.
Well, even if they're on FMLA, you have to use you can't be in leave without pay if you got time,
No,
whether you got FMLA or not.
We just call it unpaid leave, so we can get away from the
The
other.
unpaid leave.
The
I like
other
that.
thing that ties into that, though, if you don't get paid for your 80 hours, that takes away the amount of sick leave and annual leave you accrue too.
Yeah,
So-
it does.
How about your insurance?
And your insurance, so.
Yeah.
And that's what people struggle with when they're gone. How am I gonna pay my insurance? If we can figure out a way to get it paid for you, why would we not? If you're on FMLA.
I don't know, but it goes back to like what she was saying, that with the different HR, you know, employees and heads and that, everything that's come through, it's changed. Things have changed so much.
So this is.
I would say if we're gonna change them in any way, you know, we always change to make it good for the employee.
What was it last?
Maybe. Because I mean, it used to be like for instance, I had a coworker, she was pregnant, they wouldn't let her do that. So that, when she got into, right before she came back, she ran out of time. So she was in leave without pay status on the first day of the month, therefore she had to go down and pay her employee, it was like $300 and some odd for her insurance to be covered for that month.
See, and I would say, you know, if Angela's in agreement, that would be something that we could work out.
But it wasn't, she was single person covered. So, I mean, she had to play I guess the employer's portion.
No.
Yeah, she did.
Well, maybe she did, but we would not do that.
Okay.
You are still employed by Shawnee County, and so the department would still pay their $800 and some odd $42 a month.
Well, this
They pay
was
regardless.
years ago. It was only like
We would not do that to an employee today. Look at it come up. Yeah, you're
And if
still
you take it,
covered.
if you didn't take that insurance, they paid you.
You're gonna pay your $20.
That was not it. I know.
Any other questions? Lots of good questions.
Go ahead, we got it now. Things we need to know.
And I want to point out, there's a lot of questions and a lot of fogginess on that. It's okay, because FMLA is like that, because there are people that make their entire living off of doing nothing but FMLA. There's entire companies that do nothing except manage third-party administered plans for FMLA companies. Because every situation can be different, and every situation can be murky. And, you know, then it's best to, you know, pair up and team up. Don't make those decisions on your own. You know, if you are a supervisor, pair up with your department head, pair up with your elected official, and say, hey, what are we doing? Pair up with Angela, myself, HR. If we need to, we pair up and we talk with the county counselor. We talk with Steiner and Watson. You know, there's a lot of resources out there, you know, but just don't remain silent. So, and I had a whole nother part, but we're gonna skip that. I am going to send everybody home with a take-home packet. You get a packet of FMLA paperwork. The reason being is, some of you, and I don't know, I know looking around the room, I've seen signatures on dissemination pages that have come from you. All right. You know, others, I think I know where that is. So it is available on the interweb. Okay, on the interweb, human resources, policies and document forms, and it's titled FMLA. It's really complicated. And, but I always advocate go there. I do get some old forms in, and I can tell that they're old because I updated it with the most recent 2018 notification, the employee notification. But I still get some that have a 2015 notification in there. So, you know, if you have a stash of these forms or anything like that, you know, shred them and recycle them and pull it off the interweb.
Oh,